Welcome back, friends. Today, we are here to talk about the value of discomfort and vulnerability. We're answering the question of, can we become more of ourselves? Let go of the things that aren't really what we want, that aren't really working for us. And can we do that without vulnerability? Can we heal from past pains to show up unencumbered as we move into our future without challenge? And can we change without discomfort? Can we really live fully without vulnerability? And I'll tell you that today I'm going to talk to you about why I not only don't think we can, but I don't think we need to, and we don't need to fear these concepts. So we're going to be talking about the good kind of discomfort and how we can begin to dip our toes in the waters of vulnerability without putting ourselves into the not so helpful kind of discomfort. So while I'm not going to encourage you into pain and suffering, I'm here to remind you and me and all of us that we don't need to fear discomfort and vulnerability because they aren't bad and they aren't bad for us. And still, if you are like me and many I know, you might want to avoid them. And that makes a lot of sense. And I understand it because I too kind of want to avoid the whole thing. To be clear, there's still a part of me that wants to avoid when things feel hard, when discomfort creeps in, when I'm being asked to be vulnerable or I know I need to be for myself. And I spent a lot of years avoiding because I know that we can stay in avoidance. And I also know that it just gets more uncomfortable being there too. So today I'm here to talk to you, to the parts of you that might be averse to the discomfort and the vulnerability and the challenges. And maybe what we'll do in the process is wake up that part of you that is here for the challenges and that wants to become more you, to be more free, to move through some of that discomfort to get to the other side. Because isn't that the way, right? The things that we really want for ourselves are on the other side of some necessary vulnerability, discomfort, and challenge most of the time, if not all of the time. Because even if something doesn't feel painfully challenging, when we're working toward good things for ourselves, there's always the discomfort of approaching the unknown and leaving behind the familiar, the new job, the new house, the new friend, right? There's uncertainty, the vulnerability of letting go of the known to go toward the unknown. So we're going to be looking at all of this today. Today, I'm here to talk to you about how retreats are a resource that can springboard change and healing and growth and how they can be such a powerful resource for us. I'm going to break down the why and the how to answer some of the most frequently asked questions that I get about retreats, what they're all about, and why I think they're such a big deal. And of course, the question that most people have but might avoid asking, are retreats like vulnerability overload? We'll talk about this and so much more. This is In Our Skin, and I'm Ashley McCann, a psychotherapist who wears many hats, and today I'm donning the retreat leader hat. I'm so excited to be talking to you about how we can realign with our values and ourselves and grow forward, and how there is immense value in the discomfort and challenge of vulnerability, and how retreats can be a place where this all comes together. I have to differentiate something here before I say more today, and that's that we live in a culture that is obsessed with self-improvement, and it's almost unavoidable. You don't need to make yourself better. You don't need to make yourself a better person. So I bring this up because the concept of growth can be really convoluted. And I want to be clear that what I'm talking about here today is uncovering who you are, shedding the layers of all the things that you've believed that you need to be so that you can exhale, so that you can start to listen to your intuition, so that you can start to connect to your own inner compass, which is the opposite of chasing gold stars, proving ourselves, and trying to accomplish things to meet others' expectations. It is the opposite of doing what others want us to do despite ourselves. So I hope that makes that clear. So when we are trying to do things for ourselves that we might think of as improvement, it might be great and fine and well, but often we're getting a lot of messages on how we should improve ourselves, and that's what we're avoiding here today. You get me? So let this be a reminder to that part of you that might take this chat we're having today and accidentally begin to apply it toward making yourself a better person. You are already a better person. You are awesome, just as you are. Even if you aren't doing it all, even if someone made you think that you aren't enough or worthy, and even if you were like effing everything up, you're amazing. You are enough. You are a human. You are humaning and you are working it out. We're all doing the best with what we've got. So my hope is that this will help you feel a little bit better about wherever you are now so that you can start to consider where it is you really want to go and how to get there. This is the kind of growth I'm talking about, growing into yourself, a new iteration of yourself, if you will. Again, not a better you, but more you. And that hopefully will feel better, right? But it's more about a feeling than an achieving or a proving or an attaining. And it might come with you achieving things that are important to you and attaining things that are important to you. But it's not about what it looks like to others. It's about what it feels like for yourself. And that feeling is what will come from living more in alignment with who you want to be and how you want to be in your life. The concept of alignment might sound a little spirit pony dancer for you, so let's ground that. I also should clarify that I say spirit pony dancer when I'm talking about things that people might find woo-woo, and alignment is not a woo concept. It is actually a really helpful resource that we can use to get clear and to feel good about the decisions that we're making as we move through our day and through our life, the actions we're taking and the choices that we're making. It's aligning with our values. It's reminding ourselves of what is really, truly important to us, what we want to devote our energy to, which can help us get clear on what we do and do not want to give our energy to. The healing that we need to become more ourselves often challenges us. It asks us to dig a little deeper, to get out of the patterns that are stagnating. So rather than staying the same, which might look like staying in the same patterns of how we are performing or people-pleasing or on autopilot, we start to wake up to the things that we really need, that we really want for ourselves. And we begin to approach those, even though that is often challenging. Retreats can create a space for becoming a little more ourselves because they provide an environment in which we aren't asked to perform or to do what we believe we have to do or what we should do in the ways that we might do in our normal day-to-day, because they take us out of our environment. And it allows us this time and space that we can consider ourselves, to reconnect with ourselves more. It's very easy to be disconnected from the messages that our body's sending, to really listen to our hearts when we have a long list of to-dos and we have the demands of our day-to-day in life. There are certainly spaces and places in our lives where we don't always have free choice, right? So when we get away on a retreat, it creates this opportunity that can allow us to actually maybe feel and connect and hear ourselves and that tiny voice inside us just a little more easily. It can create a space for a little stillness, which can make it a little easier to feel and hear and connect. And you might be surprised by what you can find in that stillness. If that sounds scary, just the concept of stillness and being out of routine, I definitely get that, because we live in a pretty high-paced world. To slow down is to be not productive. To be unproductive can feel lazy. To feel lazy can feel like we are not a good enough person, and so on, and so on, and so on. And so we go and we do, and we stay busy, and we prove ourselves over and over again all day. But how is that serving you? I know it doesn't serve me well, and I know I slip into it too. And how does it feel? How do you feel? How are you doing over there? Ask yourself right now. Maybe you're doing great, and maybe you have a lot of skills to cope, and maybe you're managing the pace of your life beautifully. But there's still so much value in stepping away, because it will show us so much that we are missing about patterns we might not have even realized we're in. Getting away and slowing down can show us some really beautiful things, can remind us of parts of ourselves that we have disconnected from. Before we start to talk about retreats, I want to point out that there are actually a lot of different types of retreats. There are retreats that are like travel experiences with surfing and river rafting, and there are those that have yoga and wine on a vineyard. And then there are the retreats that are like spiritual deep dives. The spectrum is wide, from adventurous to introspective and healing, and I've done a bit of each. The options are really boundless. This allows for you to choose your own adventure, to help you get out there and to live life. As a retreat leader, my experiences really run the gamut, and I can say without hesitation that the retreats that are really inspiring me now are the ones that are more introspective. It's where my heart is called. Now, I do like to have a good time, and I am an Enneagram 7. So while joy is a big priority, regardless for me, when it comes to leading retreats, I really want people to leave a little more restored and with a lot more of what they need to move forward in life. So I presently favor a restorative retreat with a solid dose of nature and like a dash of creativity and lots of opportunity for connection with self and others. And today I'm talking to you about how they can be a really powerful resource for us for coping, for healing, and for change. And I will say this without hesitation, because while you're going to hear me like cheer and champion and even give a little bit of research on why retreats are amazing, they do actually still challenge me too. They do call on vulnerability, which is something that I myself have avoided, as I said, even though I've had years of therapy and work as a therapist. But I also want you to understand that when I say that retreats call on vulnerability, it doesn't mean that they are nothing but challenging. It also doesn't mean that retreats are either fun or they're introspective and beneficial and healing and change. They can be both. And really, even on one of those adventurous surf retreats, people find that they get the same benefits that I'm talking about today when it comes to getting connected to ourselves. So really, any type of retreat can offer that kind of benefit. It doesn't have to be solely a meditation retreat. It doesn't have to be a healing therapeutic intensive or a ketamine-assisted therapy retreat for it to have an impact. And it doesn't have to be a struggle to offer those benefits. So there's so much that all retreats really do have in common. And so today I'm going to break it all down for you so that we can, maybe speak to those parts that have question or reservation. So I'm going to name the challenges. Then I'm also going to talk about the benefits. And I'm going to help you understand why when it comes to vulnerability and those good kinds of discomfort, retreats are really what come to mind for me. So let's look at this. What does make retreats hard, vulnerable, and why might they bring out that discomfort? So for many of us, it is really, really challenging to be out of our routines. Slowing down can be so hard, even if we want it, even if we're craving it. For some, it's scary and even anxiety-provoking. When we have a pace of life that has us going and doing, it can be really hard to slow down. And we might not realize that all of that going and doing and that busyness of life prevents us from noticing what we're feeling and from having to address the difficult thoughts and things that are kind of under the surface for us. And when we slow down, a lot of that can come forward. So people might actually be going and doing in avoidance of having that experience. So whether it's intentional or not, when we do slow down, we do become more aware. And initially that can be a little overwhelming. And this is why retreats offer a lot of options for you to move through in your days. So you can have structure and guidance to set you up to fill your time in ways that are beneficial, but that don't necessarily follow that same trajectory that we're on at home of busyness and going and the list of to-dos. You'll have structure. Now that structure might be one that is more downtime or more time together as a group, or it might be that there is more of a plan and more outdoor adventure and doing, right? So choosing a retreat that actually feels like it's a fit for how comfortable or uncomfortable you are slowing down is really wise, so that you can just start to open the tap on those thoughts and feelings and get a little more connected and a little more aware of what you want and what you need and what might be just nagging at the back of your mind. In just a few short days, you can learn so much. It is also really challenging for us to take time for ourselves. For so many women, especially, it is really hard to prioritize self and to take time away. And for mothers, I see this as an especially difficult challenge to overcome. People can feel really guilty leaving their kids. It can feel impossible to miss out on anything. And so committing to time for ourselves can be a really big challenge. So what I suggest is that we look at this as committing to ourselves in the same ways that we do commit to our other people in our lives, the way that we commit to our job, the way that we commit to our friends, but that we give that same kind of energy and time back to ourselves occasionally. Often when we are the person who struggles to take time for ourselves, we are also a person who is overstressed and overtaxed. And so your body might need it, and your mind might need the break. And we might be avoiding that vulnerability of actually turning our attention to ourselves. Notice what it feels like when you aren't taking care of others. What does it mean to take care of yourself? Can you commit? And can you choose that? Another layer of vulnerability that we might run up against when we enter into a retreat is that there are new people we don't know. And this is a challenge. So while this can be a joy and a benefit of retreats, it can also be a challenge. It can bring stuff up. If we're prone to comparisons, we might notice ourselves feeling that. And comparison can certainly creep into retreats, just like it can at work and it can at the darn grocery store, right? If we struggle with our confidence, we might have to ride those waves to be able to show up for both ourselves and to connect with others on a retreat. Yeah, isn't that the work? Isn't that almost more of a reason? If we're struggling with things like comparisons, if we're struggling with connecting with other people, if we're struggling with our confidence, retreats create really a perfect scenario to hopefully safely and appropriately challenge those patterns so we can start to get out of them, so that we might go home feeling like, okay, I can do this differently. Because we'll have experiences like this. The person that brings something up in us, the person who challenges us, the person who we're comparing ourselves to might end up being a person that we learn that we have something in common with. And we might be able to connect with them. And then that creates the scenario that our mind can refer back to. That not all people who we are comparing ourselves to are the thing that we are assuming they will be better than us, that they won't like us, that they aren't kind. I mean, these things really do come up for people, and I've seen them come up at retreats. And so retreats create these spaces where we can lean into that vulnerability and that discomfort, because there's this opportunity to challenge these patterns in ourselves. So instead of letting comparisons separate us from others, we can find connection and commonality and shared experience if we're open to it. And truly what we find is that we have something in common with the people we are surrounded by on retreats, because we've chosen these experiences for a reason. After college, there's not a lot of experiences that we have in life, unfortunately, that bring us together with like-minded people in ways where we're all similarly vulnerable, which actually can be very bonding. And I think it is part of the reason that retreats have this almost magical effect of creating these deep, long-lasting connections like kids at camp. Everyone walking in doesn't have the control, doesn't know everyone. Everyone has the same kinds of vulnerabilities, and we'll all have different sensitivities to it. But what happens is that it's ripe for connection, and strangers don't have to stay strange. The bonds that develop on retreats tend to be so deep, so fast, that it doesn't even really make sense. But I do think that it is the vulnerability that could explain that we are all letting ourselves show up in these ways that are more open. And here's the other thing. Being with people who don't know you has some serious perks. It's like a capsule experience. No one's expecting you to act a certain way, show up a certain way, do a certain thing. Just think about that. Like, what would it be like to be in a space where you just can be, and no one's going to be concerned with you not doing what you usually do? It's lovely. And in this way, I really do recommend going on retreats where you don't know people, because there's no expectation of you. You don't need to perform any certain way or act any certain way. And it's really freeing. Again, vulnerable, but still freeing. Now, a big part of retreats is that we don't have to do all the things and make all the choices, and it's laid out for us. But on the other side of that is that we don't have as much control as we do in our lives at home, right? So inherently leaving behind our creature comforts and our routines is vulnerable. It creates discomfort. It can be challenging. We're doing this in favor of an experience that will provide us something that we've chosen and that we don't usually get to have. But we might not be able to have our coffee the way we are used to having it in the morning, and that does create discomfort. we might not have control over the temperature of the house. And I laugh at this, and I'm using it specifically because this came up on a retreat with my friend and I. We roomed together. We love each other. We thought it would be so easy to stay together. And she liked the room hot at night, and I needed to be cold to sleep. So after 3 nights of not sleeping, I snuck off to bed early, turned down the AC, and hid the remote. And while I did sleep, I may have woken up to see her covered in all of the yoga mats because she was so cold. Unexpected things can happen. And part of going on a retreat is that we're leaping into the uncertain and the unexpected, and we're releasing some control, and it can be really good for us. So, of course, my friend and I got through the sleeping thing, and that retreat wasn't defined by that moment. But these are challenges that we can run up against. And amongst our comforts is, of course, food preferences. This is a really hard one for so many people. I think I said this in the last episode, but over 60% of women struggle in their relationship with food, struggle with disordered eating, and not having choice over food or control over food can be really challenging for a lot of us. On the other side of that is that we might be going on this retreat because we're excited about the food and what is going to be offered, which is usually really clear. And we can always ask questions. But relinquishing the control over meals and allowing ourselves to accept what is provided can be both challenging and vulnerable and uncomfortable, and the most helpful thing that some of us can do for ourselves. It makes sense, doesn't it? That this is challenging but beneficial. That while, of course, we can pack our favorite snacks and we can ask all of the questions, it can still feel hard. And for many, this is exactly the kind of hard that they need to be able to take a challenge, to experience the good kind of discomfort and uncertainty and allow it. And of course, there is the joy and relief of being cooked for and for trying new foods, which leads me to tell you why I feel so strongly about the benefits of retreats. It's actually because they challenge us. It's ironic, isn't it? Vulnerability is uncertainty. It can feel like emotional exposure or openness, depending on how you're feeling about it in the moment. Psychologically speaking, vulnerability is a building block of trust. Trust in ourselves and trusting relationships with others. It is also the way of forming deep, meaningful relationships. It can help us heal and grow beyond the limitations of our past pains. Now, 50 to 70% of people have experienced trauma, and we have all had hard life experiences that have affected us or changed us in some way. Everyone I know has something that they are dealing with or working on or would like to see change. And vulnerability is the way through. It's the way to move beyond. When we're vulnerable, when we acknowledge our challenges, when we face them, when we share, we gain new self-understanding and we experience emotional healing. I know that this talk of vulnerability could be getting some hearts racing, and it could have some of you wanting to just turn away, but vulnerability can actually look a lot of different ways. It looks different for each of us. So it doesn't have to be forced. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, and we don't have to do it in ways we don't want to, right? So we don't need to overshare or even share for that matter. But when you do share something with others, your thoughts, your feelings, reflections on past experiences, you might find yourself reaping the benefits. Seeing yourself through new eyes, feeling seen and heard and understood by others, to no longer be holding it all in and carrying it yourself. And likely what you will hear others say is me too. And by sharing, you give other people permission to share what is true for them too. So remember, vulnerability is a practice. Like I said before, it's vulnerable just to take the time for yourself, just to show up, or to slow down, or to join in, or to relinquish control, or to allow. And being vulnerable is a worthy practice because it allows us to be more authentic. It's being honest with ourselves and with others. And retreats do this without demanding that we share our deepest, darkest secrets or that we sit in a circle and process our traumas. This stuff happens between the waves while we're surfing and by the fire with marshmallows and while we're paddling boats across a lake. And in case you haven't heard me say it enough, and I'll remind you that I did spend most of my life pretty vulnerability averse. So it's definitely taken me time to not actually get anxious around concepts like these. That inner fight or flight instinct to get out of potentially uncomfortable situations is rather strong. All of this makes me think about this retreat weekend we had back in college. By candlelight, sitting in a circle, we were all going around sharing our hard life experiences. I don't remember the prompt, but I shared, and I was so hesitant, like I wasn't going to share because we didn't have to. And I got really brave and I shared. But then for months or maybe years after, I would replay what I said in my head, ashamed and embarrassed as if I shouldn't have, because it went so against the grain for me. Now, when I look back on that today, I'm actually really happy that I shared, but at that time, it might have just been going past my edge. There was no talk about it after. We didn't chat with each other about anything any of us had shared. And the next day, we kind of went on like nothing had happened, even though everyone was sharing these really hard things. So I didn't get any feedback or any response, and I couldn't see anyone's faces as I shared because it was dark. So it just let this story develop in my head. I would share if I was given that candle again. But back then, I was comparing what I had shared to the experiences that others were sharing, feeling like my experience was small fries in comparison. But friends, I want to tell you that our experiences are relative. The hardest thing that has happened to you was hard for you. The hardest thing that happened to someone else might be very different, and it was hard for them in whatever way they experienced it. But someone else's difficult trauma does not make my experience less difficult for me. Doesn't make it go away. So comparing in that way can really just leave us stuck in an experience like the one I had, feeling badly about having felt bad in the past. It's quite useless, but it's really easy to get caught up in that. And again, this is why I run retreats, so that more people are talking about their lived experience and understanding that it's okay for it to have affected them, or for whatever's happening in the present to be hard and to feel supported in it. So again, sneaky comparisons, they can sneak in. And one of the best things that we can do for comparisons is challenge them and reality check them rather than stay in them and succumb to them. But know that if we don't succumb to the separation of comparison, we learn so much about ourselves and we can connect with others so deeply. And retreats do more for us than ask us to practice vulnerability. They're amazing in the way they can help us realign. Because while one of the challenges is that they take us out of our comfort and our routines, one of the greatest benefits is that they take us out of our routines. They give us space from the patterns that we're in that we might not even recognize that we are in. And we can identify then which ones aren't really serving us. They give us a degree of separation from our usual demands, and that helps us just take stock of our life, to look at it from a new angle. Because retreats are for you. They're built to help you and your nervous system get a rest, to have a new experience, to learn new ways to cope, to help you recharge. They help us get out of sensory overload, they help us slow down the pace of life, and they really help us restore, refilling the tank so that we can get back to life a little more prepared when we return. A little more ready to manage it all, and maybe to do it differently. Because that's what realigning is. Looking at the path that we've been on and potentially choosing a different way. Looking at where our energy has been going and if that's where we want it to go. And when we get in this kind of a space, it's so much easier to reconnect with our values, to what is really important to us, to what really matters. And do you often stop and think about that? Now, you might think about this, and it might sound really simple to connect to our values. But the thing is that often when we do these life scans and we're looking at what's aligned and what's not, we'll see that the things that we value aren't necessarily the things we're spending the most of our time and energy on. And that often those things aren't getting what we want to give to them. So getting us out of routine and repetitive living gives us the time and space away from our to-do lists of our day-to-day, gives us space to access where our energy is going. Is it actually going to the things that we value? Often the answer is that it isn't quite what we'd hoped. Often when we take that life scan, what we see is that our energy is going to a lot of things, and only a few of them are where we really want to put it. And sometimes that the things we really want to be devoting our energy to aren't getting any at all. So we get clarity. We have this time and space to consider, to see where we want to realign, and to choose where to begin. And guess what? For most, simply being at the retreat means that you've already begun. Sometimes it's all that we need to get back on the right path. Because when we're rested, when we're grounded, when some of the stressors are taken away, we do start to feel more in alignment. When our mind and our body have the chance to slow down, we can see more clearly and choose more easily the things that are going to keep us in alignment with our values, with what we want for ourselves, and we can opt out of those things that are pulling us out of balance. Because it's really hard to connect to our values and to get into alignment in chaos and in struggle, in distraction and overwhelm, and especially in chronic stress. Our values do give us that direction, and this is what retreats are all about. Asking yourself, what part of yourself do you want to give more time and energy to? What part of your life? What excites you? What inspires you? Choosing the right retreat starts to do this. And then the workshops, the creative practices, the things that we explore, they help us reconnect to the more meaningful aspects of life. And what's meaningful to you might look different than what it is to me. They can teach us a new way of being, and they can remind us of old things we've lost. They can take us back to the forgotten parts of ourselves, to our interests, and to the things that bring us joy. To those things that we've begun to believe that we don't have time for, or that we've stopped believing are for us. Things like arts and crafts and creativity and working with our hands. Most of us are disconnected from creativity, something that is within each and every one of us. Yes, you. But that we often disconnect from sometime around middle school when we start to say, I am not an artist. I am not good at that. But we can reconnect to it and we can find new forms of creative expression. Exploring things like writing, journaling, poetry, connecting to new skills and practices like art journaling or painting or working with different mediums that you might otherwise never learn or never attempt. And all you have to do is allow yourself because it's laid there in front of you. There's permission and there is support and there is direction. And it is so freeing to let go of those old stories of I'm not an artist or I'm bad at it, because it's not about being good or bad. It's just about the joy and the power of doing, of being in the moment. It's not about the result. It is about the feeling. These are coping skills. These are life skills. These are resources that we can use in that moment to reset and that we can take away with us so that we have more options for how to reset that we can take back home when we are in our life routines and rhythms. And it can be fun and it can reconnect us to things or teach us new things that allow us to access that kind of childlike joy. And this all definitely makes me think of this episode of This American Life, one of my favorite shows and podcasts. And it's an episode that's all about camp. Guys, I never went to camp, and I've listened to this episode more than once, which I rarely ever do with the podcast, because it is so joyous and so fun to listen to. And this one's really stuck with me for some reason. I think this is why. The kids are talking about camp like it is another world entirely, like a separate life, and a part of them that truly others don't seem to understand and just can't get if they weren't at camp with them. They describe it like this kind of mystical connection that they have with others. So a part of me loves this because I longed to have gone to camp, but another part of me loves this because this is how people feel on retreats. This is how I feel about retreats. I've had experiences like these kids are describing, and it's fun, and it's special, and it's different in a way that is very hard to describe unless you've experienced it. I know I've said this already, but the connections that you make with people happen so quickly and sometimes so easily, and they stick with you. You know, I can remember these moments like a roommate who went from being a stranger to a friend in the span of a few hours, and the conversations that we had about the things that we loved. And I still can remember every detail of how she would spend a perfect morning. And I will never forget the feeling of being with a group of adult women, treading water and floating in a pond and singing songs together, something that I definitely am not going to do on a typical Saturday, but I treasure that memory so much. I remember taking my daughter Mika on a retreat with me when she was a baby, and all of the women just passing her around as we all took turns working on stretching leather to make our own drums. And I remember watching the sun come up with my friend and drinking coffee. There's just so much that these experiences have brought me, and just thinking about them takes me back there. And those memories are a reminder to reconnect with the things that I took away from each of those retreat experiences, truly. And much like the kids on the podcast, I know that when I talk about these experiences, it's impossible for me to really communicate to other people what it's like. But I'm really trying here in this podcast episode. And I know that my friends who love retreats as much as me, or who have been with me, that they know what I'm talking about. I sent a message on a thread with a group of ladies who came on one of my retreats last year this week, and their excitement at our text thread waking back up, talking about getting the warm fuzzies, seeing messages pop up, just brought me so much joy, and it did for each of them too. And these were people who were strangers before spending 3 days together in Vermont last fall. Clearly, I live for this stuff. And I think that this stuff brings me life, really. I feel a little more alive and awake after a retreat, even just talking about a retreat. Because it's not just about connecting with other people, it's about getting connected to ourselves and reconnecting to the parts of ourself that we've forgotten, that we've lost touch with, or that we haven't yet connected to. Because when we're in our day-to-day life, the demands are demanding of us. And when I'm in my day-to-day, I'm doing the to-dos. It doesn't mean that I can't take time away for myself in other ways, and I definitely recommend that we all do. Because time away does help me get clear again, and it's truly important to me. And setting aside dedicated time and committing to this gives so much back to me and allows me to come back into my life a little better off for everyone who I interact with. Time away helps me identify what I want to hold on to for myself and what I really need. The things that I may not give enough of my attention to in my day-to-day. It helps me see when I'm falling into routines that I didn't intentionally opt for, so that I can opt out and that I can reconnect with a routine that feels more aligned, that feels more beneficial, that feels more balancing. Getting away and getting out of the usual, it can also show me what's become habituated that I didn't notice was. This can be as simple as something like staying up later or waking up later, or noticing that I've maybe stopped cooking and making time for meals in the way I previously had or would like to. So for each of us, it's a way of seeing things that we might not see as clearly when we are in it in our day-to-day. It allows us to step back and look at what is working and what isn't. Every retreat I've ever gone on has given me something that I've taken away. New practices, new ways of thinking about myself and my life, and new ways of seeing myself in it. And again, not to be too spirit pony dancer, but I really think they can be transformative. And stay with me on this. Transformation is a big word for change, right? And change is happening constantly. But maybe there's a change that you need, but you're scared to navigate. And that's a pretty human experience. A retreat can create a space for this kind of hard, uncertain life work. It's what Martha Beck describes as bug soup. It's a part of the best analogy that I have heard in a long time to describe a transformative process, which is just a person becoming a little bit more themselves. It's shedding layers of ourselves, of cultural expectations and beliefs of who we need to be that aren't ours, that we picked up along the way. And to come out the other side feeling a little more aligned, a little more like ourselves. So what is bug soup? Bug soup is the stage in metamorphosis when the caterpillar has to go inside the chrysalis and dissolve into bug soup. They dissolve what they used to be so that they can come out something different on the other side. They have to let themselves turn to soup to become a butterfly. And in this stage, it's not just like fun and games and beautiful wings coming out the other side with ease. Coming out of the cocoon is also super vulnerable because they're exposed and they're tired and they're pushing through and they're getting stuck. And if anyone tries to help, they die. So they have to do it themselves. They have to let themselves be vulnerable with new wings, and they have to push through, and they have to be exposed until they get there. They have to keep going so that they can flip and fly, right? And so Martha Beck uses this analogy to remind us that our strength is built in that struggle and that difficulty in that process. Can you relate? I'm sure you can. Retreats have created this space for me to kind of dissolve in that way, to be in that unknown, that soupy space. They're like a chrysalis, a space where change can happen. And there's space to take time for myself, for you to take time for yourself, to connect, to be seen, and to be supported in the process. And retreats have offered the kind of spaces and places where I've felt like I am emerging, but I'm not quite sure of what it's going to look like or how it's going to feel. And it's been really helpful to be in those, in a vulnerable place of not really knowing what's to come, but to be surrounded by those people and to have that space away when things have been challenging. I'm really grateful for that. I'm thankful for those little transformations and the space to be in the unknown and to actually have the time and ability to just be there. Have you had a bug soup kind of experience recently? Honestly, as hard as it can be, I do hope so. And I hope that even though it was hard and uncertain, and even though you had to push through and feel exposed and so vulnerable, that you did it anyway, and that you took yourself into that chrysalis and that you came out a little more you, that you were able to leave behind what you no longer needed or what you no longer wanted, and that you found new, cool parts of yourself to replace them. And maybe a retreat isn't cards for you, or maybe you want to do the bug soup thing with your therapist. I would not begrudge you that choice. I'm sharing about retreats today because just like somatic work or CBT or yoga or breath work, retreats are a resource and they could be a helpful one for you. They create a space to practice all kinds of coping that you're taught by someone who's a professional, and you get to practice in real time, and then you get to take away what you love and what sticks into your life. So we can get a lot of learning and a lot of practice under our belt in real time, which is pretty cool. And there is some research out there, even though it's not a lot, that shows that people are benefiting from the effects of retreats, and that those benefits are actually lasting, and they're not just mental, but they're physical. It's pretty cool. And when the retreat is therapeutic, I can say so much more. When we take time away to do trauma healing work, to do weekend healing intensives, whether it's solo or in a group, to have that kind of purpose and focus and intention can be so powerful. And with this time and freedom from distractions and home and work, people can often focus and connect and do hard work with a little more ease and a little more attention and devotion, because the time allows us to do it that way. It can allow us to really make progress in a different kind of way. And I want you to know that I'm not trying to suggest that a retreat is a way to go in with trauma and come out healed, but it helps us start to peel back the layers and start to do parts of that work that otherwise might take a lot of time in weekly therapy. So it just offers us a different way in and a different way through. And if you're curious about retreats and intensives, I would love to share more with you. This is the time of year that I start to open up my summer and fall calendar for not only group retreats, which you'll find on my website right now, but for individual and private retreats, which are always available. I love doing work in this way. And so whether it's for a private group or joining in one of my group retreats to be with new people, or if it's just for you, that there are so many different ways that we can build a retreat that will fit your needs. And it's a really awesome process. So you get to work with me to create that plan to make it just right for you. And with that in mind, here are some things that I'd love you to take away. One of the greatest things about retreats is that you can really choose your own adventure. What do you need right now? Is it relaxation or adventure, a nervous system reset, or support through a tough season? It's fairly safe to say that there is a retreat for that. And if you can't find it, reach out. While I offer retreats, I also support so many women with many different amazing and diverse options and opportunities that I would love to share with you. And when I build my retreats, I do so with choice in mind. And most retreat leaders do the same. So when you're thinking about building your own adventure, I recommend just checking in with the leader to make sure that if any of the aspects aren't a fit with you, that it works well for you to opt out or to choose something alternative. When I host people, I tell them to ask themselves, do you need time to yourself? you can take as much of it as you would like. Do you have a shoulder injury? No problem. Either adjust your yoga practice or sit it out. If you're tired and you need a nap, take it. There aren't expectations of you. Retreats are purposeful, and your individual purpose is yours to decide. So I recommend checking in with yourself, seeing what it is that you need, and to continue to check in over the course of the retreat in case that's changed so that you can talk to the person who's running your retreat to get the right kind of support and the right kind of direction while you're there. The next thing I hope for you to take away is that if there is a retreat experience that excites you, to do it even if you don't know someone else going. While it is so special to have a retreat experience with someone you love, one of the greatest benefits I've reaped is signing up and opening up the opportunity to meet someone new. There's major benefits. Treat it like summer camp, make new friends. And this might mean going even though you're a little scared. You might be able to surprise yourself with your bravery. And if I've said it once, I'll say it twice. The growth happens in the vulnerability, seeking the good kind of discomfort, the kind that allows you to practice being vulnerable in ways that feel good, not overwhelming, the challenges that align with what you want for yourself. Listen to your heart, choose a retreat that really calls to you, ask the questions, and make sure that it is a good fit for you and your needs. And finally, remember to choose retreats and retreat leaders that speak to you and what you want to bring into balance. And I know that I'm not the only therapist that offers intensives, which you might be able to get covered by your insurance or incorporated as a part of your therapy, or covered by options like care credit that will allow you to make payments to make it more reasonable and accessible. So that is what I have for you today, folks. And if you are interested in learning more about retreats, you know where to go. It's going to be in the show notes, but you can make your way over to my website where you can look into the retreats I have listed or send me an email to inquire about private one-on-one retreats as well as small group and yoga retreats that you can cater to whatever it is you are looking for as we build them together in the process. Thank you so much for being here again today. This is In Our Skin, and I'm so glad that you have listened along. I'd appreciate so much if you take a minute to go over and rate and review and to make sure that you're following along. For those of you who haven't yet checked it out on YouTube, know you can always watch these episodes as well. And YouTubers, you can always pop the pods in your ears and go for a walk, try out all the different ways to listen. I hope you're finding some good takeaways. I can't wait to be here with you again next week. Until then, take good care.